Karting is a fairly simple sport, but we like to make it complicated. In this video, I'm going to run you through some of the terms most commonly heard around the paddock, what they mean, and the context in which they're used, so hopefully you can understand more of what is being said. Let's start with some adjectives, words describing things or a situation. First of all, a hack. A hack is a busy and chaotic session on circuit. While lots of karts are close together, this often leads to contact and a high risk of being forced off the circuit. Shifting. If someone is described to be shifting, they are not physically shifting through the gears. It is more a figurative term for when a driver is at one with the kart and driving at a high pace, either setting purple sectors or cutting their way through the pack. Hooked up. If a kart or someone is described as being hooked up, it means that the kart is working absolutely perfectly and in unison with the driver, such that it looks like it's completely on rails. This is usually accompanied by very fast lap times, setting either personal best or overall best sectors. Lit. If a kart or someone is described as being lit, it means that in that session they are absolutely on the limit of grip, driving well and setting very fast lap times. Lean. Most karting engines are two-stroke, which means that the air and fuel mixture going into the engine from the carburetor is critical for performance. If the engine is said to be running lean, that means that the air-fuel mixture is weak, such there is not enough fuel going in with the air to get the most power out of the engine. The opposite of lean is rich. If a kart is running rich, it means that too much fuel is going in with the air and the mixture is too strong, meaning the motor is not able to work at its best. This is often accompanied by slow exits out of corners, a dull and limp-sounding engine, and potentially also blue smoke coming from the exhaust. Singing. When the air-fuel mixture from the carburetor into the engine is absolutely perfect and everything about the engine is working as it should, it can often be described as singing because the engine revs well, accelerates out of the corners, and achieves great top speed. Now moving on to some nouns. Again, in karting, we like to complicate things, so sometimes we use different words for things that already have a name. The kart or go-kart itself will often be referred to as a wagon. The engine can be referred to as a motor. The carburetor that mixes the fuel and air before going into the engine can often be referred to as the carb. Inters. In karting, there are only two types of tyre: slick tyres for dry conditions and treaded wet tyres for when the rain hits the track. However, some people will refer to inters. No, this is not some secret black market tyre deal that's going on. Inters are purely partly warm wets that are saved for when the track is not completely wet, but also not quite dry. Often worn tyres in this situation can work better and are referred to as intermediates. Drop down. A few years ago in karting, the push-back bumpers were introduced to stop front-to-rear contact. When a driver has made contact with another kart and their push-back bumper has been pushed in, often the bumper looks like it has dropped down, hence the term drop down. Next up, verbs. Something that you do or have done to you. To go in. If you are to go in on someone, it means that you are overtaking them on the inside. Lunge. Lunge is much like going in, however, normally from a slightly more optimistic distance behind the kart in front. To launch. To launch someone is when you cause contact with the front of your kart on the rear of the kart ahead, normally leaving them to exit the circuit swiftly. You may also be on the receiving end and get launched. To send. A send is a synonym for an overtake, but usually used in the circumstance where the overtaking driver initiates an optimistic but successful maneuver. Sometimes the word send can also be used as a synonym for launch. For example, I got sent into the tyre barrier. Punt. Punt is when someone makes front-to-rear contact with the kart ahead, pushing them wide of the corner. This may be accidental or deliberate. To pod. To pod someone is very similar to punt someone. However, usually this is used for side-to-side contact, not front-to-rear. A driver may overtake up the inside, carry too much speed into the corner, and initiate side-to-side contact with the driver on the outside. To load. To load someone is when the kart behind pushes the driver ahead in the braking zone wide of the apex of the corner to allow an easy, however illegal overtake on the inside of the corner. Loading can also be seen at the start of races, usually when drivers are braking on the inside of the circuit to protect their position and the queue of karts ends up nose to tail with the driver at the front usually coming off worst. Selecting reverse. If a driver is said to be selecting reverse, this is not a literal term, of course karts only having forward gears. A driver is said to select reverse when they are dropping down the order rapidly, usually either due to poor kart setup or poor driving. See also pulling the handbrake. Once again, this is a figurative term, with carts only having foot-operated brakes. If someone is to pull the handbrake, again, they are dropping down the order very quickly. Parked it. Again, a figurative term. Parking it is very similar to the football term for parking the bus, when a driver decides to defend their position at all costs, blocking the inside of the corners and defending at every single opportunity. To fall off. To fall off is when a driver leaves the circuit of their own accord, usually due to a mistake or lack of skill. To have a nosebleed. Again, a figurative term, or at least we hope so. A driver is described to be having a nosebleed if they have been achieving above what is expected during a session. Then the reality of the situation dawns on them, and they quickly drop down the order back to where they usually reside. Now, some terms used for kart setup and kart behaviour. If the kart is described to be coming on, it is when the tyres are reaching their optimum window and the grip of the kart is increasing such that the best lap times can be achieved. The opposite of this is when the kart goes off or went off. If the kart has gone off or went off during a session, it means that the tyre temperatures went above their operational window and got too hot to give the best grip, and thus the lap times fell away. A driver may also be asked to switch the tyre on. Switching the tyre on is the act of putting as much energy through the tyres to warm them up as quickly as possible to get them into their optimum temperature window. Jacking. Jacking is the act of picking up the inside rear wheel of the kart due to the flexing of the chassis and the front end geometry. If the kart is jacking a lot, it means the inside rear wheel is raising a long way off the ground. If the kart is said to not be jacking, it means that this is not happening enough, and the rear inside wheel of the kart stays on the ground, usually initiating understeer. Wonging. Wonging is a funny term that is often used in high grip or hot conditions when the grip is so high that it overcomes the tyre's grip and causes the kart to act erratically and bounce throughout a corner. This is usually accompanied by slow lap times. Stroking. Stroking comes from the term four-stroking. This is usually when the engine of the kart is running too rich, as we described earlier, and the two-stroke engine is not running at its best and not having a power stroke on every revolution. Bogging. If a kart is described to be bogging, it is not exiting the slow corners as expected. This can either be through poor kart or engine setup or poor driving. Hanging the rear. If the rear of the kart has comparatively less grip than the front, usually in medium and high speed corners, the oversteer looks like the rear of the kart is hanging wider than the front. Gripped up. If a kart is described to be gripping up or has gripped up, it means there is too much rear grip, not allowing the kart to exit off the corners freely and hurting the speed onto the straights. Now, some terms that are often used to describe people. We are not condoning or encouraging the use of any of these terms. However, if you are called one of them, at least you'll know what it means. A bandit. A bandit is a daylight robber, someone who comes along and takes positions without any regard for safety or the people around them. A sender. If someone is described as a sender, it's very context dependent. It can be used as an insult or a compliment. For a compliment, a sender is someone who is completely in control and very confident at initiating overtakes and having good races. Conversely, as an insult, a sender is someone who initiates many optimistic moves that can often lead to contact and crashes. A hazard. Someone can be described as a hazard on circuit if they are risky to be around. Someone who initiates a lot of overtakes or often attracts contact and crashes. See also weapon. A weapon is someone who is to be avoided at all costs. Either they initiate over-enthusiastic moves that often end up in contact, or they're someone who defends their position at all costs, often resulting in a crash with the drivers around them. So that concludes our karting dictionary of many of the terms that are most commonly used around the karting paddock. I'm sure there are many, many more, and please let us know the family-friendly ones in the comments below that you've heard around the circuit with your own definitions. If you've enjoyed this video, we're sure you'll enjoy the video we made about karting hand signals, an equally confusing and convoluted system.